So I've got some setup to do, just very minimal, but got our new Rails project open, created. Not going to worry too much about any content because, if it's up, we'll see that, that Rails new, that just generic, what you call it, page when we get it running on Heroku. Not worrying too much about that. Let me close some stuff here in my browser. All right, so we got a new Rails project. Oh, I am recording. Okay. And yes, I do want to give you full disclosure. I haven't done this in a long time. So we're going to struggle through this together, and I'm recording it. So as we figure things out, it'll all be there for us in the end. But yeah, it's going to be pretty much exactly the thing that we all do and have done, or some of us have done. So let's get Heroku open. Log in. Heroku. What the documentation? Ruby. Getting started with Rails. Getting started with Rails 5. Okay. So there's a couple kind of gotchas with deploying to Heroku. So one of the first ones that a lot of people run into, and let's see, basic Ruby Rails knowledge, locally installed version of Ruby, got all of this, basic Git knowledge, or Heroku user account, got that. All right, so you're gonna need the Heroku tool belt. And this is the command line interface application. I believe I have it. Open up my terminal. Does it tell Heroku? I bet I can do Heroku like version or something. Or just type Heroku. Let's see what happens. I should have it. This returns something. Okay, cool.
Seth, where do we get that on Heroku? I have Heroku open, but I'm a few steps behind you.
Okay, yeah. So we get to documentation. So devcenter.heroku.com. And then over here on the right, we have command line. And that should Heroku CLI, here. Install the CLI by following the instructions. I believe it's in, if you jump through getting started as well, Ruby, ready to start. And then right here, download the Heroku CLI 4. So it's required, so they have it a few different places. And yeah, we'll jump back to here. Let me throw this into the chat as well. Okay, this is kind of like, I'm pretty sure I've set all this up. So I shouldn't need to log in. Write your app. We've got an app. Okay, so this is important. Rails, and we see this database Postgres. Now, database, already have an app that was created without specifying database Postgres SQL. You'll need to add the PG gem to your Rails project. So that is, I just generated this application without running database Postgres, and that's because Heroku doesn't support SQLite. It's just how it is. So really, you're going to need Postgres. So changing that line and doing that at the beginning. However, if you don't do it at the beginning, it's just a little bit more configuration. You need to configure your database in your database YAML because Postgres needs some other things to be set up. So that is really one of the, I think the biggest barriers is the database part. But let's go ahead and work on that.
Seth, before you go on, could you just show us where on the Heroku site you found the Postgres part that you're working through?
Yeah, so that link that I just linked to, getting started with Rails 5.x on Heroku, that's just on that first page. I'm scrolling down and there's Write Your App, and then there's Database. Oh, and they have an article, Why You Cannot Use SQLite 3 on Heroku. So let's go ahead and change SQLite to PG, which is Postgres. It's in here. Here. Gem PG. And now we can run our bundle again. And then we have to go to our config database.yml. Okay, it's done. And we need to use this Postgres SQL adapter instead of the SQLite 3 adapter. Now, Postgres uses some more things. SQLite is very straightforward. It doesn't require much. So they have this example database config, which I'm just going to try because I'm honestly not sure what my Postgres setup is like. So yeah, just gonna paste this in here and go from there. And probably run into some issues, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. We got Postgres installed. Postgres is more robust than SQLite, so it's going to maybe have some issues. Let's see what we get. We'll do exactly what's in here and walk through this and see where it gets us. So we're going to generate a controller. We're just going to follow the steps in here. Rails 5 no longer has a static index page in production. Okay, so we won't get that. So we have to generate a new page. Then let's put that into here. In our welcome app views, welcome index HTML.b.
If we already have like a welcome page in our Rails app, do you think that would matter?
No. So this is just because we're using a completely brand new Rails application. So if you're using Rails 5, that static page, you know, the welcome to Rails page that we see, that's not there in production mode. So that's what this little tutorial is telling us. It's saying, you know, hey, if you don't have anything in your application, you know, just Rails new, then even if everything is working perfectly on Heroku, there's not going to be anything to display. So you're not going to know. So it's like, hey, generate a controller, create a view, put it in your routes so that, we can make sure that you actually have something to see. So but yeah, this isn't required for deployment. This is required because this app just has nothing in it. You shouldn't have to create any views, any controllers, any of that stuff, this part of it. We need a route for our application. Yeah, this is just getting the application to have some stuff in it so that when we actually deploy it, we should see something. Okay, so now it's telling us, make sure our server works. See something. Cool. Let's get back to Firefox. All right. Previous versions of, I'm not sure if I've played a Rails 5 app. I think I have, but yeah, we'll just keep going. Previous versions of Rails required you to add a gem to your project to enable static asset serving and logging on Heroku. If you're deploying a new application, this gem is not needed. Sweet. So we'll skip that. Rails 5 requires Ruby 2.2 or above. Heroku has a recent version of Ruby installed by default. However, you can specify an exact version by using the Ruby DSL in your gem file. At the end of the gem file, add. So yes, this is something that you'll want to specify to the version of Ruby that you're running locally in your gem file. We saw that we had a page there, so I'm going to exit that. But Ruby-v. Okay, 2.3.1. So I want to make sure that that is set to the same thing, so that what the version of Ruby I'm using on my local machine in development is the version of Ruby that Heroku is going to utilize on its servers. So that is set up. Heroku relies on Git. If you don't have any output, have Git. Okay, so let's add everything to Git, and we'll see Git init, Git add all, Git commit -m. Okay, so just added everything to a Git repository. Verify everything was committed correctly by running Git status as well.
Do you think we need to do that if we already have an existing Rails app, or is that just more of like the initial setup kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm starting from a fresh, like I just did Rails new. So this isn't a Git repository. This isn't on GitHub. This is brand spanking new, fresh code to work with.
Probably just push the code that we add to, right? Pretty much.
Yes. So if you have your repository on GitHub, you can actually set up a pipeline, and we can look at some more of that configuration stuff in a minute. I want to see if we can do this, and we'll find out. Make sure you're in the directory that contains your Rails app, then create an app on Heroku. Okay. Heroku, create. So because I've done my authorization to the Heroku CLI, and you just walk through those steps to set it up, it's created this Fathomless Waters application, which if I go over here to my Heroku account, you should see a Fathomless Waters now. Yes, here we are, Fathomless Waters. Cool. You can verify that the remote was added to your project. So yes, what Heroku does is it relies on Git, but it adds a second remote to your Git repository. So after you do the Heroku create, when you do this git config list, without the grep, you would see multiple repositories. So we see these remotes, but if we I guess git remote verbose -v. You see right now we have these two Heroku ones. Let's create a GitHub repository because that's going to be more in line with how everybody else has. Repository, Heroku dash, yeah, deploy example. Great. Add this. It's going to send a bunch of stuff to GitHub. So now we should see it here. Okay, so we've got a repository on GitHub. Now if we do our git remote -v, we're going to see 4 remotes. So we have Heroku's remotes and we have GitHub's remotes. So we can work on our code. We can push stuff to GitHub all day long. And then, at the end, when it's working where we want it to be, we can do, we can push to Heroku. Or we should be able to. Let's keep rolling through here. Okay, don't need that. Heroku create. Okay. And this is where you tell Heroku. So git push Heroku master. So if you were working on branches, this 4th thing is what you can tell it to push. So, if you had a bunch of branches, when you merge something into master, then you can push master. Now this is relying 100% on your local code at this point in time. So let's push to Heroku and see what happens. So this is what's going on the server right now. It's gotten our code. It's using Ruby version 2.3.1. Installing dependencies using bundler. So it's running bundle install with these flags. Installing all of our gems. Pressing, launching, verifying, deploy, done. Okay, says it worked. I feel like that was too easy. Let's see what else we got going on. Okay, this is a big part. It might get here. Look at your application. Here's open. And you see it. However, the applications that we're going to be deploying aren't this simple. This is just one static web page. So we have a static web page that's working. But this isn't actually what really is going on in, the Rails apps that we're going to be deploying. So let's let me.
What's the fathomless waters thing?
That is just what Heroku does. Heroku creates these names when you just create a new, what do they call them? What are these things called? A new dyno. They give them these random names. So fathomless waters with a number, enigmatic inlet with a number, tranquil scrubland with a number. And then you can change it to whatever you want. So like this is my final project, Rails React app. This is my Rails project, portfolio project. This is my Sinatra project, I think. So yeah, you can change them however you want. But when you just generate one, like with new, create new app, it's going to give it one of these random names. Okay. Migrate your database. Okay, let's get some stuff in our database. I'm just going to grab some migrations from this other project. I think I'll be able to do this. Maybe not. Yeah, we can do it. They won't have any models or anything, so they're not going to do anything. But we can grab some migrations. DB, migrate, copy. Let's see if this will work. No. I can do it here. Code, labs, DB, migrate, copy, no, Heroku, DB, paste. Okay, so now we have a migrate folder with some migrations in it. Now we can run. We need to push this new one up to Heroku. So let's do that. Let's try and migrate them first locally. Rails, DB, migrate. See what happens. Okay, create table MP3s. Rails generate migration. Let's just create a brand new migration. Maybe this was not the best idea to just create. Oh, it just did this one. It's timestamps. Didn't do any of the previous ones. I guess that's fine. We can delete these. Okay, so we have one migration. We created a table. We have a table in our database. It doesn't. Where is our? Is it there? CD Heroku, CDB migrate, or DB. Oh, I was in the wrong place. That's why it only migrated that one. Rails, DB, migrate. Okay, error. I was thinking we'd get an error. That's why I wanted to do this. So let's see what our error is. Wait, terminal. Okay. Postgres, PG for Postgres, connection bad, could not connect to server, no such file or directory. So something different from SQLite and Postgres. Postgres has to have a server running locally for your Rails app to connect to. So is the server running locally and accepting connections on Unix domain, socket, whatever it is. So I think.
Seth, can you just repeat that so we get it right?
Yeah.
I'm taking notes. So Postgres has to have a server running locally in order to. So
yes,
basically,
so
make sure we've created a Rails server before we play around with it.
So not a Rails server, a Postgres server. So it needs a database server. So there's going to be a Postgres service, and I can only speak from the perspective of the Linux system that I've worked with. But as far as I know, this is true across the board. So Postgres needs a database service running in the background on your machine to create databases and connect with databases. There's this other layer, and it's because it's more robust Rails can just create a SQLite database for us and talk with it and do its thing. And that's why it's the default way of doing things in Rails, because you don't have to do any other setup. It lets you get going really quickly. But Postgres, we need a server running. So I think I used to have in my bash or one of these things. Let's see. I had a shortcut. Yes. But I might not have all this stuff anymore. So I'll see if this post on alias works. Then I know I have my Postgres server working and it's on. Post on. Says the server starting. So I'll see if migration works this time.
Can you walk us through how we can get a Postgres database server? What we look for?
So it's going to be a little bit different for each machine. I know that Postgres SQL. I know the easiest way is should be through the Postgres website. If you're on Mac, I believe there's a brew package that actually makes it really straightforward. Homebrew, yeah. So you can use Homebrew, and that actually makes it really straightforward to install Postgres. You just look for the packages, and here, Postgres SQL, and then I don't know. I never used Homebrew because I haven't had a Mac in a long time. But yeah, you can install it through Homebrew. That's a whole different discussion. I had Linux Brew, but I haven't worked with Postgres in a while, so I got rid of it because I was just cleaning up stuff on my machine. Yeah, let's go through it. Debian, Ubuntu, I have Ubuntu, so hopefully this isn't super complicated. Choose your version, 17.4, I believe. But yes, everyone will have to set this up. Let's see, settings, just make sure that's right. And it might be painless, it might be painful. Details. 17.10, 17.4 is close enough. Okay, create the file. This, add a line. Etc. APP sources list, import. Oh wait, includes PostgreSQL by default. Install on. Oh, this is here. Okay, yeah, perfect. I bet I can do this, that, and then we'll see what happens. Platform support, source. Okay, terminal. Paste. Sudo paste. So I knew there would be issues. So this is locally. Now, remotely, you have to explicitly run your database migrate on the remote server. The way you do that is you can run commands on the remote server using Heroku run. So this is like when you do Heroku run, you're connected to the dyno that you have remotely running for this project. So when we do Heroku run, when we look at our git remote-v, we have this fathomless waters that's connected up when we create it for us. So when we do Heroku run, it's like being we want to execute this command in the terminal at Heroku. So if I remember correctly, let's get here. We can look at activity. There actually should be, where is it? Access settings. Where's the log? We should be able to see overview. Maybe it's in here. This is how you can link to GitHub. You can connect to GitHub, and we can look at that as well. Yeah, let's run it more. There it is. View logs. Add a new tab. When we view logs, we're going to see, everything going on with our app. So we see that, this is like our, our typical web server. When we run Rails server, we see, here's the Heroku web. I started it up, and here's the server running. And we see we get the GET request when we looked at that root HTML page, and we see the router and everything going on with our server. And we have all processes. So now let's send that command across. Make DB migrate. And we see it says running RakeDB migrate on here, connecting, running. We see what happens up on the server. It gives us the output. Create table, schema migrations, create table, internal metadata, try some stuff, do some stuff. If you look, we see the Heroku run command came through. Starting process with command bundle exec rake db migrate by user. It tells me that I sent this run command. It came through, even though it's the CLI, it comes through their API. And then waiting client, change from starting to up, start process, direct db migrate, complete, process exited with status 0. Refresh this. Oh, that actually refreshed on its own, but we see, okay, this was our initial deploy right here, and we have our build succeeded. Then we have when the server did its thing. And it keeps version numbers. And then we see attached database. So this tells us that, to me, it was successful. We didn't see any errors. It says that now there's this database that's connected. And we're deployed again with a checksum. So if we go back to our server, we should see it still working. Awesome. If we had database issues, we would be getting errors right here. We're getting info again for about that. But yeah, process exit with status 0, so that worked. So the default setup works on Heroku, just doesn't work on my local machine, and probably not on your local machine to start. So let's see if we can get that set up. Execute a process type. Visit the app in our browser, view the logs. Cool, yeah. So you can run things remotely. You can open up a remote console, so you can do run commands. You can do Heroku run Rails console, and you have your Rails console on your remote machine. It's being fed right directly to you in your terminal. Other things in here you might or might not need. So it's really a matter of how complex your application might get. With a default Rails app, you should be pretty close with just these things. The biggest thing you're going to struggle with is your Postgres and getting it set up. Typically, since your app hasn't been in production, you can just wipe out your SQLite databases, get Postgres going, work through that process, and we can continue debugging that here for a little bit. but really it is going to be different for each person to an extent. Cool. So it looks like I got it installed. But yeah, let's connect it to, let's not worry about my local server. Unless you really want to see me debug for a while. Let's look at some other things we can do with Heroku. Once we have it up, we can link it to our GitHub repository. So connect to GitHub. GitHub repository name, Heroku, search. We can connect it. Now, once we have it connected, we can do some cool things. So automatic deploys. Enable automatic deploys from GitHub. Every push to the branch you specify here will deploy a new version of this app. So now you don't have to do that Heroku push that we were doing before. So this, it's in here somewhere. What command was it? Git push Heroku master. We won't have to do that anymore. Every time we get a new push to master, it will update our application. And then we also have this manual deploy. So if there's a different branch that we want to deploy, we can just click deploy here. This will allow us to automatically push things. So let's look at a change and how that's going to work. Let's change that view. Views. Oh, flat iron. The time is now. Okay. So git commit. Change some code. Git push. So that's going up to GitHub. And we should see, where are we? Okay, our log should tell us some stuff. Git's going to get it. And close this other one down so I don't get as confused. All right. Oh, sorry. Enable automatic deploys. So if you don't enable that, it's not going to work. So let's change something again because that was not enabled. So I click that button, flat iron, let's say again. Okay, so pushed another change to GitHub on master. And our automatic deploy process, it won't be instantaneous, but it's connected to this repository. We see the changes there 18 seconds ago. Come back. Got automatic deploys enabled. Every push to master, deploys happen automatically. We don't have any CI or anything for it to wait on. So that's working. Oh, look, build started. So we see deploy 5E92FE7F, which I'm going to guess is the checksum for this. Let's see. 5E925FE7 or FE7. 5E92FE7. Yep. Release version 6 created, and it's telling you my email, build succeeded, restarting, state change, gracefully stopping, goodbye exit, process, and it finishes, it gets the new code, starts it up again, starts it in single mode, Puma starting in single mode, state change from starting to up. Now if we look at our application, refresh it, and it has our new code. So that's something that I suggest you enable. Just makes the process easier. Typically, everything that you have in master, you want to be showing in your application. Where are we? Here. Something else that you'll need to configure. settings. Let me remember where it is. So you're going to have environment variables. And you can do OAuth or something, you know, and you're going to need to define those somewhere. Like those are in your .env. They don't go to GitHub. You know, how are they going to get to Heroku? You know, those are file. That's something that you don't want to upload anywhere. Like there's a reason it's in your git ignore. So Heroku is just using Git, so it's ignoring those files as well. How does Heroku get those environment variables? And we see it set, you know, lang, rack environment, rack environment, Rails environment, some of these things, config vars. So under settings, and this is also where you can change the name to something. But you have these config variables. These config variables are your Rails environment variables. So you click reveal config vars. This is where you get all that stuff. So in here, you know, if you had in your if in your code you had, you know, that env equals, or you know, Facebook ID, or like if you had Facebook, you know, API key, or whatever it is in your code. This is where you define that. You know, it would be whatever it is, and you would add that. Now your application has access to that environment variable. This is another spot that you might get hung up on, is adding environment variables. I'm just going to get rid of that because it's fake. So yeah, this is something. This is how it knows it's in production mode. These environment variables that it's setting. You shouldn't need to change much other things. Because you can add a custom domain and stuff if you want to. You can do some other things. Maintenance mode. You can delete it in settings. There's other things you can poke around and look at. The overview will show you what's been going on. You know, deployed a new one, build succeeded, deployed, API key, removed it, added it. This shows you what you have running on your server. For these standard ones that you'll be building, they're free. For Heroku comes as well as a free add-on. The way that Heroku manages this is that after a certain amount of inactivity, so people haven't visited your site, you haven't visited your site, your application, it will put these dynos, quote unquote, to sleep. So like you see all of these have Z's next to them. That's because they're sleeping. So if I go to my, let's say this foodie view one, foodieview.herokuapp.com, we'll see that it takes a minute for it to load. And that's because this dyno is asleep. It's going to take it a minute to spin it up, to turn it on, to get it ready to serve the application. So we see it's still, okay, there it is. It just loaded. And if we go back and refresh this, we'll see that it's no longer sleeping. And it's awake now. And that icon changed. So if you get your app up and you haven't messed with it in a while and you go back to look at it and it's just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there, don't worry, it's probably just asleep. It's how Heroku manages these things. It's it's also how they get people to upgrade and pay, because you know, if your app becomes popular, then you don't want it falling asleep. So there's that. Any questions? We've got about 15 minutes left in the hour. And I think there's probably a bunch of questions. So let's dive into some of those. I'm going to throw the feedback form link in there as well as we're diving into some of this questions at the end. Really, I think the largest thing that people wrestle with is Postgres. It's local environment setup. It's a little bit different for everybody. From what I hear, it's pretty straightforward with Homebrew. You can set it up as a service that starts every time your computer starts. That can also be something that you don't want to do. I had that shortcut because I worked on an application that used Postgres. but I would also have the shortcut to turn it off because it does consume resources. So when I wasn't coding actively on the application, I would turn it off. Let's see. I'm gonna keep trying to get this to work unless people have other questions. We got the app up and running with the default setup on Heroku, even though we don't have it working locally. So that is a positive. You can, this could be useful, set up, let's see if we can do this instead. Config, database. We should be able to, that's production, default, test, default, we don't have any tests, development. So I think we can use, instead of this default option in development, we can use SQLite here. I don't know that I've gotten it to work though. So let me look at another Rails file for that default. CD config. Start. Okay. I think if we take this, SQLite 3, and put this here for development, we're going to need to put it back into our gem file because we uninstalled it. We're going to move it now down here into development test, because we only want this available to our development environment. Or I guess just, we have this development one, so we'll put it in here. All right. I'm going to bundle install again. And we'll see if this works. Rails, DB, I agree. No. Let's see what our error is. Rails supported. Adapter not specified, development, database not configured, available default, test, production, / database. All right. So let's see what else we might need. Okay. So it says what's available. Oh, I should have kept that other one open. Let me just open it over here. Not that. Oh, I went too far. Code labs, demo, fig, database, text editor. All right. Oh, development default. Database. Let's try this. Okay, I think this is trying to inherit all of this stuff. So let's change this to adapter, like we have in here, and let's put that timeout on there too. I guess we need the pool as well, because it doesn't have any information, I'm thinking. Adapter, okay. let's see what happens then. Awesome. So there are differences between Postgres and SQLite. I think they're in ways that very few of us will ever run into and hit, especially in the projects that we're working on right now. So you can have this hybrid in development and even in testing. So if you wanted it in testing as well, you could use SQLite and set it up separately. And then you have this Postgres database for production. Postgres needs a database and a username and a password. So you can set up SQLite and Postgres. Let me push this. Git commit. Yeah, there's our schema, migration, development database. Let me make sure. Git commit. Change dev db to SQLite 3. Hit push. I have a feeling this will be useful. So let me put this link in here. So yeah, a few pointers that I know people have told me, not necessarily how I did my projects, but one is to get it set up if you can. Some of you are past this point. Get it set up working before you start really writing your code. So got all this working, you know, it's automatically deploying from master. We know that our static page is working. So we know that everything is working, you know, as it should be, because we can get this. We see that our databases are migrating properly in our logs. So yeah, this is, you know, we know, okay, cool. It's working. Now let me get to writing code. We know that our local development environment, if I can get back to it, is working. We migrated our databases successfully, and we're rocking with SQLite locally. So with that, we can start building out our application. We know that, you know, as we push, things are going to get updated on Heroku. If it breaks, that's cool. We haven't shared it with anybody yet, but when our app is in a working state, it should also be working on Heroku. So we can do intermittent check-ins. You know, we can finish, let's say we finish one controller and all of its associated views and models or something. We can jump onto our Heroku link and say, okay, does this work even with this limited functionality at this point? And we say, okay, everything's still working the way it should be. And then we can jump back into our code and build up the next feature. We see things are working locally. And when we push to master, to GitHub, to get things up to date, we can say, okay, give it, you know, a minute, jump on Heroku and look at our link and look at our live production server and say, okay, are things still working right? And then we can do it that way. I know some people have said it's very helpful, and they found it helpful to build their app while it's also being mirrored and doing those intermittent check-ins. I just struggled through adding these changes and pushing it up. But yeah, that's that appears to be it.
Seth, can I ask some questions?
Of course, yeah, go for it.
This was amazing and really, really helpful. So would we also be able to use a Rails server to kind of local host it and see what it's doing in the browser if we've set it up with Heroku?
Yes, so that's what we have, these different environments. So, yeah. And I'm just cleaning up a lot of this stuff out of here.
So we could kind of see it live on Heroku, or we could use Rails server.
Yeah, so you can still run Rails server. What that's going to do is, by default, we don't see it and we're not explicitly doing it, but this Close some of this. This config vars. This Rails environment is going to get set, and it's not going to be production. It's going to be development on that Rails server that we run locally. Mm-hmm. And that's how it knows to use this database here, this development database. That matches the environment, and then it does this. Then we have our server running locally, and we can do whatever we want with that. So let's go.
I see.
So this is running. We can change it around. Let's go to our view. Refresh. And that's doing that all locally on our development server. It's not touching Heroku at all. We have set up this auto deploy, which we don't have to do. So, you know, as soon as we push it to GitHub on master, it's going to deploy. However, we can set up, we don't have to turn that on in access, deploy. So, you know, if this is off, disable automatic deploys, we can just wait. And then, you know, when we get everything on master and it's working the way we want, we can just click deploy branch, and it will update only when we tell it to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the local server still works just the same.
Okay.
It's just getting it working remotely.
Is there a reason to use SQLite 3 in development as opposed to just switching over entirely to Postgres?
I don't really think there is, outside of the fact that it's just really simple and straightforward to do. Like, it's baked into Rails to work.
Right.
It does use less resources also.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is a concern, Postgres will use more because it is running another server, you know, service running. It doesn't consume a ton,
right.
Or it shouldn't consume a ton. You know, when I've used Postgres on this computer locally, it was a relatively complex application that was running, so it was doing a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if you get Postgres set up on your machine and running locally, I think running the same database server in development as you are in production is only going to be helpful, because there are those little differences that I honestly don't know. If there was anything major, I'm sure I would know about it, but I haven't. But you know, they're little, like, there are things like how they treat, you know, integers and big ints, and like some of them will treat them as, you know, they can be 1 bit and some of them can be 8 bits or however, you know, really low level differences. So outside of those things, they should be pretty close to the same, but there are some gotchas that you might run into. So I think it's always better to emulate as closely as possible in your local development environment what you have on the server.
Other than using Heroku, I know Heroku is free to host these. Would it be worthwhile just to use Blue Ocean or any other host? So as far as backend things go, like running your web server on a shared service provider, I've never done it before. I've never tried to do it before. So like, I have my domain and my shared hosting plan that I use, and I think they have Rails available, but you really want to be able to do some things on the server level. And most of those environments are locked down, so you can't do that. DigitalOcean will allow you to do whatever you want on their droplets, but you know, that's also, you just get a raw Linux server and you have to install everything and set everything up. Mm-hmm. So it's not as friendly at all. Like, you're going to be installing Ruby on it. Well, I don't know. They might have some environments that automatically have some of that stuff. No, they're pretty raw.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, last time I was there, they were, yeah. So, so really,
so Heroku is really it.
Yeah, it's the most friendly for this, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the end of the hour. I had told the study group team, like, this study group scares me, because they just, you know, assigned it to me, and I was like, I don't think I've deployed a Rails app to Heroku in like a long time, personally. So I was like, I remember I struggled with some things, and you know, I'm sure Postgres was one of them, and getting it working locally, but you don't actually have to get it working locally to get it working on Heroku, which is nice. But yeah, remembering to migrate your databases after you deploy, remembering that you need Postgres in your application, changing those connection strings and things, and getting the Heroku CLI installed on your environment, your system, and yeah, linking up GitHub to make it easier to deploy stuff. I think those are the big things. But yeah, really, just getting started with Rails 5.x on Heroku. I think it was. I think I deployed 5.0.2 or something, and they might not have had this document out yet, which is probably one of the reasons why I struggled so much back then. But yeah, this was more straightforward than I thought it would be. Maybe their documentation's just gotten better too. But yeah, that's it for this evening. Like I said, I recorded this, so I'll get it up into the application, into the video app, so we can, or you can, I guess I can too, utilize it in the future.